All right. Hello, beautiful people. Happy Saturday. And good to be back with another edition of Dad Advice. In fact, I realized I should probably start giving some numbers to these. Must be around 20, 25, somewhere there now. I'll try to go back and do that. Session number, blah, blah, blah. Why not? It'd be cool when I hit like a real number. I'm going to go ahead and throw in my phone number. I'm back at my desk today, so I welcome anybody who wants to call to do just that. Let me go ahead and put that in here. Find it. There we go. And also my YouTube channel. Notices that. I'll do that, and then we'll get started with the conversation. Hope you guys are having an amazing day so far. Probably start with yesterday's questions that I didn't finish off. There we go. All right, so you got a member in there, a YouTube channel in there, and let's get started. So we left off yesterday. I think I didn't get to everybody's questions, so I'm going to go back to some of those, and feel free to throw in your questions. And if you don't mind, the more detailed that you can put into your question, the better I can make it kind of specific to you. So keep that in mind as you put it in there. And yeah. So let's start with the general advice I like to begin this with, which is that I want you to appreciate for a moment. And I'm going to do this for myself, and you can do it with me. Just a good exercise to do daily, because eventually we incorporate it in a real way, to remember that you're a whole person. And what that means is, if you've never seen me before, is the idea that we typically will focus on the one or two negative traits that we see in ourselves. So the message that I want to give you is that, yes, there are one or two things about you that probably need some work, just like there's one or two things about me, and one or two things about every person who's watching this video. But we don't want to focus on the one or two negatives. We want to look at the whole person. The whole person is made up of 1,000 different positive attributes and one or two things that aren't so positive, let's say. So we want to look at the world honestly. I think it's a good approach to life, is to try to look through the eyes of truth at the world. And the eyes of truth say that you are a whole person. And in fact, that's a beautiful person, right? Because once you see that it's just, there's a little zit on your arm, right? You're beautiful. So can you see your own inner beauty? Can you see your beauty for what you are in this world? And in fact, it's the imperfections. If we were all the same, if we were all exactly the same, then what would this world be? There would be nothing special about anybody. So your imperfections, in a way, are part of your specialness and part of what makes you beautiful. Now, once you take that in and you incorporate it and you really feel you're beautiful and you really feel like a whole person, I want you to remember that you can do anything in the world that you want. And that is up to you, what you choose to do with that decision. The only thing that limits us is our mind. And so ask yourself, what do you want to do in your world? Because it is your world. All right. So with that in mind, anything I say here is just my advice. It's nothing, not a specialist or anything. I am a dad, and I've lived through a couple years of life, and I'm just here to share some thoughts with you that you might not hear otherwise. That's hope, is that you can get some random thoughts that come your way, because that's how we learn new things, is sometimes through just randomness, right? We just hang out in our environment all the time. We keep hearing the same things. So when you go and you hear somebody new that you've never heard before, and you get a new perspective, you learn something, and that brings awareness. And that awareness allows you to change. Because without awareness, you're not going to change, because you don't know there's something that should change or could change. So that's kind of my goal. But at the end of the day, I don't want you to take anything I say as gospel. I want you to challenge it all yourself and ask, is this appropriate for me or not? Because nobody knows you better than yourself. And this goes for any advice. Be able to listen, filter it through your own sensibilities, and then use it or don't use it as you find appropriate. So, all right, so that's the housekeeping in the beginning of what we'll talk about. And now let's just go to some questions from yesterday. I think we left off with Depressed Musician had asked the question, how do you deal with toxic people? So let's talk about toxic people for a minute. And the first thing that I wanted to kind of throw out there is to always challenge yourself and say, am I the toxic person here? So we tend to assume, right, that the toxicity, right, is outside of ourselves. But sometimes it can be our shadow. That we're throwing, there's some suppressed aspect of ourself that we're throwing outside of ourselves to someone else and saying that's disgusting. And we can't handle it because we've disassociated it from ourselves. So the first thing you have to ask yourself, and that's what people allow us to do, that's what relationships are really good at, is figuring out what are your own imperfections. Better than anything else. That is what, in my mind, hopefully relationships can be all those wonderful things. But from a self-growth perspective, relationships can offer you the opportunity to hold a mirror up to yourself and learn some uncomfortable truths about how you really feel about things. And so to any relationship, any time we're interacting with people, there's some of this displacement that we do, and it gives us the opportunity to ask ourselves, are they toxic, or maybe is there something going on inside, right? They say, like, when you point to someone, there's like 3 or 4 fingers pointing back at you, right? That's kind of the old saying, and that's what it's getting at. So now, but let's assume you've gone into things and you're like, you know what, this person really is toxic. Now, then it depends kind of what your options are. Are they family? Are they friends? Are they acquaintances? Like at work? Are they at work? Right? So let's go through all those. Let's say we'll go through all those different toxic people, right? Family, friends, work acquaintances, and then just people we meet along the way. So let's start with the easiest one. People we meet along the way that seem kind of toxic. Easy. You don't owe them anything. They don't owe you anything. You just change the subject and move on. It's that easy. And sometimes it takes a little bit of work to really feel comfortable, because I know I used to feel sometimes like, oh, I don't want to embarrass this person by saying I gotta go. They're gonna see through me. They're gonna know that I'm not. It's more really that I'm not interested in talking to them. But no, if they're toxic people, we have a right as an individual to choose who we want to interact with and how we want to use our time, because that's all we have in this world. We have a good 80 to 100 years of time, and we get to choose how we use that. And if that is not being around toxic people, that's our choice. So just feel comfortable, especially in those social environments. If you feel someone's toxic, just move on and go find the next person in the room. Okay, and then I guess we come to toxic friends. That's the next kind of, or coworkers. I guess toxic coworkers would be next from this range of people. And there we have a little less control because we have to work with them. But I think we can choose to maybe create a little of, there's where we get into boundaries and create some boundaries and create some separation between us and them. Choose not to go out to lunch with them. Choose not to hang out after work with them. Be okay with them not liking us, hopefully. Depends on the work environment. Sometimes we have to pretend to like somebody from a political perspective. That's just the game. But at least taking on this perspective of creating, and we're going to talk about kind of boundaries in a minute as we get to friends and family more so. In fact, let's talk about boundaries, right? Because this is where it's going to come down to. And someone put it to me once this way, and it's just a good visualization that allows me to see things clearly. And the idea is that if you can just envision a bubble around you and a bubble around the people, right? So it gives you something to kind of see. So anyone you're interacting with, there's a bubble around them, there's a bubble around you. And what you want to do is create it so that your bubbles aren't intermingled for these toxic people, right? And so let's even go to so the coworker that's kind of toxic, if we can just say, you know what, they're there, I'm here, I'm safe, and they can't hurt me, it can change how we have to react. We don't have to react out of defensiveness or out of protection of any sort. Rather, we can just kind of be there and listen and let it go. Let it go. Doesn't have to hang out. So, and that's going to be the approach for family too, to some extent, because family is a great like saying this. I think I don't know who they attribute it to, but it's like they say if you want to think you're holy, just wait till you hang out with the family, right? And then it really, you can really see how unholy you really are. And that's a great perspective because, especially family really can be triggering for us in a real way because they're the deepest triggers in some ways. So again, creating boundaries, setting expectations, speaking, at least with family, sometimes with coworkers, you can, with any of these people, hopefully you can say, look, if we want to have a relationship, this is how it's going to have to be. You can set those expectations, you can set those boundaries. I'd love to hang out with you, but we got to sit 10 feet apart. And if they can't respect that, then you don't hang out with them. And so you've set your boundary and then you follow through with it. And sometimes it might take a couple times, but eventually they learn. People learn eventually. Most people learn eventually. So, and then with friends, I think that's a little bit of a challenge because you don't want to just dump all your toxic friends. But on the other hand, you probably have to dump all your toxic friends. So if they truly are toxic, I do believe that's not a healthy thing to be around, toxicity. And you just spend less time with them. You see them once a year. And that's what so you move them to kind of the back burner friends you see once a year and you catch up with once a year. Maybe that's your narcissistic friends or whoever they might be, and you kind of change that dynamic a little bit to make it suit you better. So you don't want to totally get rid of anybody in your life. I don't think that's ever a great idea unless they're abusive. So that would be kind of my approach for toxic people. All right. Let's see what else we got here. And I put my phone number at the top here. If anybody wants to call in, feel free to reach out, take an adventure of the day, doing something a little different, and we can talk about whatever things you're dealing with on the phone and kind of have a give and take and let everybody listen in, which can be kind of fun. And actually, I'm going to come over here since there are some questions here, so I'll go ahead and look at this real quick, and then go back to the questions from yesterday. And feel free if you have questions. The more detail you give me, the better, just because that allows me to put some meat on the bones, and I'll extract it as much as possible to make it relevant to everybody. So, Ricadocious, thank you, sir. I do recognize your name, so it's good to see you again. Should I be a sugar baby? I mean, you can. I don't know if there's a should or should not. It's a transactional kind of situation. If it makes you happy, go for it. I mean, I would say be careful, just, with who you're hanging out with in advance. But at the end of the day, I think that most relationships, there's some aspect of someone giving something. And this is just a more blatant example of that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I think it's socially, people would say it's inappropriate, but I think that if you look at it holistically, you can understand that it's actually no different than any other relationship, in a way. It's just you've set up front what the exact terms are. So, but go in with your eyes wide open. It's your life. You get to choose what you do. That's the general advice. Everybody here should be doing what they think they should be doing and what they want to be doing. Because you get one life. This is it. We don't get to there's no do-overs. No do-overs. Hi, Dad, I need a new washing machine. Should I invest in an expensive one or just buy a secondhand? So, I would say that there's probably an in-between with washing machines in particular, which is the cheapest new washing machine you can buy. First of all, you can find a washing machine for about, I've been buying some washing machines lately for about $150. In fact, that's probably where I'd probably go. And, if you got a truck and it's easy to move it, call around at some local garage sales and just say, hey, look, I'm looking for a washing machine or estate sales. So you can even just look like at estatesales.net, call some ones that are local and say, I'm looking for a washing machine or looking for a washing machine and dryer. And truth is, you can probably get, for $150, you can pick up a washing machine from a really expensive house that probably hasn't seen all that much use. And that probably makes a little bit more sense than even the 350 basic machines that are out there. I think that's kind of where they're going to start, 350, 400. So I would probably do that. Yeah, I do that, especially if I can move it myself. I think that's probably how I play it out. Yeah, I think that, yeah, between those, that's where we go. All right, question from another father. Say one of your children turns out to be a serial killer. Do you disown them? I like the question. So, look, I don't know what it means to disown somebody. What does it mean? Does it mean to no longer associate with them? I don't think that would be fair. I raised that child. I brought the child into the world. Now, obviously, I'm not responsible for their decision to be a serial killer, but to some extent, had something to do with it, right? We all become who we are because of our parents. So I'd be embarrassed by them. I think most people that disown their kids, that's about their own embarrassment because they feel so attached to their kids, and so in such a place of that they can't separate where they end and their kid ends, that they're so embarrassed by what the kid has done, they have to publicly say, I disassociate with my child. The reality is, and I see this more and more as my kids grow up and become more independent, is that they have to live their own life. And it's not necessarily a reflection of me. I'm going to answer the phone here. Mm-hmm. Let's talk to whoever's on the phone, and then we will come back to the cool serial killer question. Hello.
Hello.
How's it going?
Good, man. I got a question for you. Someone asked me this recently. I thought it was a good question.
Absolutely.
If you could go back in time 25 years and give yourself advice, or have you from 25 years from now come back and give you advice as you are right now, which would you choose and why?
I like it. So what would be your answer?
Yeah, I think that if I went to me 25 years ago, even if I gave myself advice, I would just ignore it and think I somehow knew better than my future self. So I think I'd take 25 years from me now.
Oh, I mean, so those are my two options. So either I can go backwards or I can go forward. Okay, that's fair.
Yeah, you can go back.
Okay, I got you. I'm misunderstanding the question. So yeah, so sometimes people ask the question of like, what advice would you give 20-year-old, Josh? And then okay, but you're saying you get to choose one way or the other.
Yeah, or you could have you come back to right now.
Right, but at this point though, you can ask once you make up a question like this, you can make part of the terms that you physically go back and say, hey, dude, this is me. This is Josh at 45, and so. But I think it's a fair point though, because at the end of the day, we're somewhat blinded by awareness, right? I talk about this a lot, of this aspect that we can only see what we can see, and as we get awareness, we can create change and we can get new perspectives. But we're sometimes just so stuck in our head that it wouldn't work. So, but the problem with that, I think now is that the 65. So I'm 45, so that's going to put me at some quick math puts me at 70. 70-year-old Josh coming back to 45-year-old Josh might just do the same thing. Like I might not. He'd come and he'd say, well, just Josh, understand X, Y, and Z. And 45-year-old Josh would kind of shoo him away just like 20-year-old Josh would have shoot away, 45-year-old Josh. So, so I'm not sure that, so now it becomes just more of a practical question, right? Since both Joshes are going to, push away, it's more like, which should I take the risk on? And so now the question is, for me particular, it's like, well, what would be the advice that I would give my 20-year-old self that would be so fundamental?
True.
So, and I guess I could, and I don't know what the 70-year-old Josh would tell the 45-year-old Josh that would be fundamental. So I guess I have to go back to 20 and say, learn about yourself before you enter relationships. I think that's how I'd play it out. How about you?
Oh man, yeah, that's good advice. I guess I probably just tell me twice. I'm 35, so 20 years ago, yeah, 15. I probably tell myself not to make decisions based on what I thought other people thought of me.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's hard though, right? Because you can tell yourself that all day, and at the same time, just it you can't implement. Like there's a certain age where like you can know that all you want, but you don't have enough skills or enough balls to or courage or whatever to implement that. So yeah.
So it's probably better to give yourself tangible advice, like stay away from this particular person, not something more like generic, like live for yourself.
Maybe, yeah, like yeah, absolutely. Don't invest, in such and such. I mean, that's the best advice is the guy that comes back and says, buy Apple. That's kind of the, that's the Josh that I want to come back, and buy Apple, buy whatever it is, buy Google. When this thing called Google comes around, just go buy it. But love the question. So thank you for kind of sharing and being brave. And where are you from?
I was going to ask if you're from South Jersey. It sounds like you might be. I'm originally from South Jersey, but I'm in California now.
Oh, cool, awesome. So so I have a hypothesis. You can tell me if you think it's true or not. So I've been out to California a couple times. So I think that the reason California is so like laid back and chill and cool and creative, that's the first assumption, is that like all the people that were stodgy on the East Coast back whenever the big migration was, 150, I lose track, whenever it was. Like basically if you were stodgy, you stayed on the East Coast, but if you're adventurous and cool and fun, you went west. So that's my hypothesis of like why it's so much better out west. Does that have any truth, or is that, do you think that's?
I think that's true. I mean, I think the sunlight, I'm in San Diego, so I think that the sunlight stuff down here definitely cheers people up, makes people happier. But I got buddies that come out from Philly or New York or whatever, and they think that it's too slow or it's too laid back.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there might be like if you were super driven, career oriented, like chasing money, you might also stay on the East Coast unless like you're going directly after the tech industry.
Makes sense. Got it. Makes sense. Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
All right, man. You have a good weekend.
Thanks, man. Thanks for taking the brave route today. No one ever does it, so it's awesome to hear somebody. Be well.
All right, man.
Cheers.
Later.
Bye-bye. So cool. So back to the serial killer question, right? So the question was, would I disown my child if it turns out they're a serial killer? So and the easy answer is like, hey kid, if you're watching, and you are a serial killer, I'll disown you. So like now there's like some pressure not to be a serial killer. But I think what happens with this disowning, and because I think it's important for us to realize this as kids, that our parents do this. Because once we understand things, then we can interact with them better. So this aspect that when we have kids, if we're a parent, I think for 99% of parents, unless they change, they see their kid as an extension of themselves. So all their hopes and dreams get pushed onto their child. And so when the kid disappoints them, right, they feel lost. It's not just that the kid disappointed them, it's like they themselves have been decimated. So and the goal, I think, for a parent is to start to see your kid as their own functioning adult. Just like eventually every kid needs to see their parent as just a regular old adult, right? There's a reality that forms for everybody when they can interact and see each other as whole people with some flaws, some greatness. But I don't think that I would disown my child for being a serial killer. I think I'd be embarrassed by it. I think I would be hurt that I kind of brought some of that into the world. But I don't think disowning would be appropriate. I think that I would have to own my mistakes. I think in general we have to own those things that we create. That's what responsibility is, right? So the responsibility in the world means that we own those things that we create. So I think that would be my approach, is that I would be there to, I would say, emotionally support, but help with whatever healing process there could be. Because I brought this person into the world, and I do think that's the responsibility of the parent. Is, there's, you have to give a child a healthy environment, which means both a roof over their head, good food, and also the emotional support that they need to become independent and healthy adults. And otherwise, I don't think you should have kids. I should have kids. Anyone should have kids. And yeah. So anyway, okay. Like the question though. And also, as you saw, if you want to call, there's a number at the top. So go ahead up and scroll up to the top. There's a phone number. Call in and we can talk through things. If you have specific questions, please give me as much detail as possible if you want actually an answer to your question. Okay. Question from a now adult. A disabled child, would you overprotect or let free to experience and make mistakes? So I can't really speak to a disabled child because I think it depends on the disability. I think at the end of the day, I'll give advice in general about, and this is a hard advice. I'm going to give you some advice that I didn't follow so well myself, and I still don't follow so well myself. It's hard to watch our kids fail. We want them to succeed. We want them to be happy. And it's really hard when we can do something to enable their happiness or to create their success, to step away and let them fail. But the reality is the only way we learned was through trying and through making mistakes. And the only ways our kids are going to learn are through trying and making mistakes. So I think it just depends on, the disability, what kind of mistake could we be talking about that they could be making? Is it dangerous versus is it just something that, hey, they can learn and they'll move on, right? And then some parents, and also this very depends on the person, right? So even with kids, some parents allow their kids to do things that I'm like, I wouldn't let my kid climb on that thing. They're going to fall off and break their neck. And other parents will be like, whatever, they'll learn. So, I think this is something which is kind of it depends on the parent. It depends on the child. The parent has to know the child. The parent has to know how bad the mistake could be. But I do think we have to let our kids make mistakes and grow from them. And I think we have to let ourselves make mistakes and grow from them, right? How hard is it for us to take the risk, to try something new, to, we don't do that because we want to prevent making our own mistakes, right? So we can all learn something from that and maybe take a little risk and try to make a mistake. Because the more mistakes we make, I think what you'll find is the more you'll learn and the more you'll grow and the more you'll feel alive. Do you feel alive? I think that's always a good question. Do you feel alive? Because I think that's the goal. That's, in a way, we talk about happiness, right? The happiness is the goal, maybe. That's what people talk about. But I think more than feeling happy is this feeling of being alive, of being free, of being open and growing. That, I think, is different from happiness. And that's not saying that you should have sadness, because sadness will pull you down. But I think that's the feeling we're looking for. So I hope you feel alive. And if you don't, I hope you'll take a minute to figure out how you can feel alive. What are those things that you need to change in your life that make you feel trapped, that make you feel maybe a lack of hope, and then create steps to tangibly change those things so they can kind of release you from their shackles and you can be, alive. And we can talk more about that if you want also. I think that's an important topic. Okay. I hope to purchase a beautiful house like you one day. I absolutely hope fluffy salads that you have an even nicer house. Whatever you want, I hope that you'll get it. I think that's what dads and moms want for their kids. You guys all get that? That's what parents want for their kids, is that they have whatever they want. Show what they want. Okay. Dealing with a lot of anxiety and depression lately from OCD and stress. What should I do? So the first thing I would kind of throw out there is I hope you have a therapist that you can work on these things with. That's your first thing, that it's available, and make it available to you. So that's the answer. The answer is find a therapist to help you work through anxiety, depression, OCD. I mean, there's three different things, and then stress, I think, is somewhat different. But and what you probably um, yeah. So I mean, that's the truth. That's my advice to you: is find a therapist. And just knowing that there's someone out there that can help you can be helpful, right? And so for OCD in particular, and I'd probably look for an OCD person if you don't have a therapist. Anxiety and OCD kind of go hand in hand. Depression and anxiety kind of go hand in hand. I'd start finding, if you could find that specialist with OCD, and then they'll help you with the anxiety for sure, and I would think the depression. I mean, and it really might be there's two. Actually, if I'm kind of thinking about it, I would approach this. There's two specialists I'd bring into my life. One being my medical doctor, psychiatrist, who could help me with maybe some medicine to help with depression and anxiety. And then I would at the same time work with a therapist who can help me create some techniques that can bring down the anxiety, can create hope for the depression, can create some strategies to manage the OCD. So I think that would be so it's a double approach, starting with some meds as well as the two things. And I think they go hand in hand. And then over time, you create these tools, I believe. I personally believe that we need the meds until we can create the tools, if that makes sense. So it's about the meds kind of help you get through where you are now, and then the tools over time allow you to get to that peaceful state. Anxiety's been a big part of my life, and the tools that I've learned to dealing with them have made a huge impact in my life. So I just highly recommend taking that two-pronged approach. How do I get emotions under control? Talk anger or happiness? You have too much happiness in your life? You're having too much of a good time? You can't help but sing from the rooftops? It's anger. Sadness. I don't. Flawless Boom. Give me a little more information. What are you trying to control? And then I'll speak to that. If you want to throw that in, I'll try to skip down to the bottom and see what catch that for you. Because I think at the end of the day, it's really about what emotions you're trying to control. But like I said, we should all try to work on making our happy emotions out of control. That's got to be the goal. What was your experience parenting with kids and hobbies? Did you ever force your kids into a hobby? Did they ever come up with a lifelong hobby from childhood? So I guess I kind of took my parents' approach, and I think most parents tend to take kind of their parents' approach. It's kind of one of the things that just kind of gets passed down from generation to generation, along with, yelling and other things. Yeah, so I think my approach was to allow them to do whatever they wanted and not force things too much. And I think a musical instrument is a good example of something where it's like, on the one hand, you can force a kid to learn a musical instrument, and I do believe that it gives them something that they can go to their whole life. On the other hand, it's really treacherous for the parent and it's treacherous for the kid. And you really want, I think, in general, people to come to loving things from within. So, I think my approach has always been somewhat hands-off. Whatever my kids wanted to do, I'd support them in learning it. I'd support them in doing it. So if it means they want to learn an instrument, I'll buy the instrument, and then they have to take lessons and learn it. they come up with a lifelong hobby from childhood. I think my kids found their own hobbies, and each one in very different ways. So I think that's kind of the approach, you know, that yeah, each of my kids have very different hobbies, stuff they're into, which is always kind of interesting just to see what they're into. And so I just let them follow their heart, and I think that's kind of the goal. And I try to expose them to different things, right? So that's part of it. Is I think the biggest thing we can do as a parent is to expose them to all these different things, so they can be like, oh, this speaks to my soul, right? And then you can enable them by buying them, you know, kind of get them started on it. Okay. Hey, you got to fail to learn. I might be learning something here myself with Mojang. So I'm just going to read through this. Don't make the mistakes. Okay. Hey, you got to fail to learn and say, don't make the mistakes I've made. They don't necessarily listen and have to learn it with their own experiences. Yeah, I'm not sure actually. I understand that. I'll come back and look at that again later. And then Shaquille, I agree that the more you overprotect, the more risk that they take on themselves, either because they want their own freedom, or and there's some truth to that. I mean, there's a reason that I let my kids, you know, do certain things, and it's just because I know that if it's not a thing, it won't be a thing. So yeah, and that's true. You know, if you really overprotect, but it's a spectrum, right? And one person's overprotection, that's just the thing, is that as a parent and a child, one parent's overprotection is the next person's lax parenting. So, and to one kid, it might feel like overprotection. Like, you know, two kids in the family, one will feel like overprotection, the other will feel secure. All right, cool. Do we live in a simulation? No, I can't answer that. And you can't answer that. That's a fun question. So let's talk about it for a minute, because I just like talking about things. And if you have a question you'd like to discuss, by the way, please feel free to call me. The number's at the top, and I'm always happy to chat about it. So do we live in a simulation? Well, I can't really prove that we don't, can I? Nor can I prove that we do. The question is, does it matter if we live in a simulation? I think that's the real question. And the answer is no, it doesn't matter. And well, the reason I like this question is because it always points out to me a bigger fundamental truth. And for you, the question is, do you live in a simulation? For another person, the question might be, what's my purpose in life? But what I think the fundamental thing that all these questions are actually asking, or someone that asks these questions are asking, is they're asking, do I exist? Because they don't feel like they truly exist in the world. And you can tell me if that feels like a truth, you know, for you personally or not, or you can keep that to yourself as well if you like. But it's just something I've noticed, is that because the way I used to ask the question was, what's my purpose? And what I realized was that the question was not what's my purpose. The question really was, do I exist? Because I didn't fully feel grounded in the world. I didn't fully feel like I was here in a way. I don't know if that's reflective for any of you. But there's a process that you can slowly learn to really feel grounded and that you exist. And then these questions all go by the wayside because they don't matter, because you know you just are. So that would be the encouragement I would give. And maybe talk about that another time. What are some of these things that can enable that? But my encouragement would be really to focus on coming to the realization that you exist. And then you'll answer the question for yourself. Okay. Flawless bottom. Oh, let's go back to you then. So I get flawless bottom to go to the top, which was about emotions. How do I get emotions under control? I easily get irritated when someone says something I disagree with. So the first thing I would ask is, how much peace do you give yourself when you do something wrong? Which is, my gut is that you probably have a pretty strong voice inside about yourself, which is kind of a hard thing. So the first thing I would say is take an opportunity to maybe work on this voice inside yourself that's always giving yourself a hard time. Forget the other people. Right? Forget the other people. The other people don't really matter. And we'll come back to the other people, but we're going to start inside you, because really that's a painful voice to hear in your head 24/7. That constant nagging. That constant nagging. So that's the first thing, is just kind of look inside yourself and bring peace to yourself. Because what will happen is, once you can see yourself as that whole person that we talked about earlier, and you can find that way to exist with yourself, then you can realize that that other person is just another person, and it's no longer, it's personal, right? So it's no longer annoying when someone says something that you disagree with, because that's them and you're you. So the more you can be, and the more solid of a you can be, the less other people bother you, because that's just them. That's their opinion. They're welcome to their own opinion. And you want to give other people their freedom to have their own opinion, because if you don't give them freedom to have their opinion, you have no freedom to have an opinion yourself. So it can't go both ways, right? I can't, and this is one of these kind of hard things to get down to, but at the end of the day, I can't say to somebody else that they don't have a right to their opinion unless I say that to myself as well. So it's kind of ironic, but I believe that's the reality. So I see we have about 2.5 minutes left. I'm here typically 5 o'clock Eastern. If you ever want to join again, I think there's a link to my YouTube, which I'm trying to live stream when I do it at my desk here. You can listen at your convenience there. I think you can find it through my profile if it's helpful. But yeah, if it was helpful, please just say thank you in the comments. And I'm going to take the last 2 minutes to talk about a couple more things that I hope all of us realize, and that are fundamental ideas to me that I try to share, and I just try to share every day. And it's the question of, what's your big lie? And the idea is that there's something you tell yourself, which is a false truth about yourself. And so for example, the best example is, you spill some milk. That initial thought that comes into your mind, what is it? Right? It's not going to be, I'm clumsy. It's going to be, oh, I'm such a fool. Something. It's a little deeper. So there's some false truth, and usually it's about 4 or 5 layers down from wherever that initial thought is. That's motivating most everything you do in life. And if you can do the work to figure out what that false truth is, I can tell you, and this is what I would tell my 20-year-old self: do the work to find your false truth, because it'll fundamentally change how you approach the world and the pleasure you have in the world. And it'll take it away from a place of running from something to a place of presence and calmness. So, and I guess I don't really have enough time to really delve into it, but I at least wanted to give you that idea, and maybe you can ask yourself quickly, what is that false truth for you? Can you envision what that is? Can you imagine what that is? And then ask, why is it that way? And then try to keep going a little bit deeper. So, as always, thank you for joining me. It was a fun session today. I had some good questions, and I appreciate the caller from California calling in, because that's always fun for me. So I'll look forward to seeing you again down the road. And until we speak again, please just remember that you're a whole person. You're beautiful. You can do anything in the world